the whole 6010. Focus, fantasy focus.
Hello, welcome into Fantasy Focus Football, presented by Wingstop, alongside Mike Clay and Stephania Bell and Field Yates. It's a full house. My name is Daniel Dopp, here to break down everything that you need to know heading into Week 16, coming out of a Thursday night football game. Guys, I'm wearing the shades again. I just want to say that.
Is your future so bright?
Yes. Well, earlier this week on the show, I got popped in the face by my dog River, and so my eye has like this big hemorrhaging contusion. So like in my eye, it just looks kind of gross.
Is it getting better or worse?
It's getting better. It's actually like getting the blood part is getting bigger because it's dissipating, which makes it look worse.
Gotcha.
But it actually is getting better.
You're now an eye expert, or specifically dog eye-related injury
exactly.
What do they call eye doctors? Ophthalmologists? Is that correct?
Yes.
There you go.
Ophthalmologist.
I've now been to too many ophthalmologists in the last 3 months for what it's worth. So
Maybe stop doing that.
yeah, right. I gotta have a conversation with my pup River about that. But we're gonna dive into a
Ophthalmologists.
Maybe listen. I'm thinking about entering her into a dog boxing ring because she's got a heck of a right hook for what it's worth.
She's 2-0 this year, that's for
I
sure.
know.
All right, let's dive into this Thursday night football game, my friends. We got a bunch to get into, but it starts with Thursday night football as we had.
I have a funny story.
Okay, well, hold
About
on.
last night, yeah.
Well, then let's do that.
Tell me about the game and I'll tell you a funny story.
We had two quarterbacks. Both of them hit 20 fantasy points. You love to see that if you started Justin Herbert and Bo Nix. Like to see that on both sides of the football. And it wasn't just that. I mean, there was some stuff going on in the running game with Gus Edwards as well. We'll dive into all of that. But first, Field Yates, I want to turn to you for a funny story.
Yeah, so last night, Daniel obviously wasn't feeling well, so he wasn't able to join us. But last night, several of us from the ESPN Fantasy and Betting team met up at a local establishment about, 10 minutes from where we are right now here in lovely Bristol, Connecticut. And this particular location happens to have a variety of games that you can play. So there's like Pop-A-Shot, that kind of game. There's skee ball. There was a cornhole tournament going on. It's a very entertaining location. It's kind of like an arcade and a bar mixed up into one. And so we're all
A little bit
sitting
of
there.
country.
It's a little bit of country, yeah. Barcade, yeah. But no, there was only one TV with Amazon, so we were all watching the game on our phones, or amongst a few
Nerds that
phones,
we are.
at a table. And I look up, and this is maybe like, 7 or 8 minutes into the game, and I was like, listen, everybody, snapshot this moment, because Mike was part of a group that was at the table playing some games about 10 feet from where the rest of us were convening. And I was like, everybody look up, grab your phone, take a photo. This is evidence that Mike Clay does not watch ball.
Doesn't watch
football. He just reads the box scores.
Yep.
And here he is. He's playing a game, rolling some dice or something. He goes,
Playing pong, yeah.
beer pong. And he goes like this. Hold his phone up. And he's like, oh, I actually am watching the game.
Yeah,
this man plays beer pong and watches football at the
That's
same
right.
time.
Yeah, crushes in beer pong, by the way.
That's what went wrong with his
Yeah.
analysis.
I can do it all, my
Okay.
friends. Okay.
I robbed us of precious time from the game last night, but I thought the big highlights, the big takeaways, and it's so there's so in a lot of leagues there's just 1 week left beyond this, but like never trust the Broncos backfield. That's the takeaway. Because last night, no Julian McLaughlin. You're like, maybe a big Javonte Williams. It was fine. Wasn't terrible. It got a lot of passing game work. That was good. Audric Estime found the end zone. And then Blake Watson looks good last night. So just generally speaking, stay away from the Broncos running game.
Yeah, it's funny. The deployment of both backfields was almost identical and kind of what we expected. So Javonte played 51% of the snaps. Gus Edwards on the other side, 46%. The number 2 running back, Estime, 13 snaps. Vidal played 20 snaps. And then you had Watson and Haskins who had 10 and 12 snaps. So they kind of had the same deployment. Not really shocking in that area. Gus Edwards has 2 touchdowns, but he had, 2 receiving yards in the game. Can't trust that every week. That's his first game with double-digit fantasy points this season. It's just, you're right, it's a mess. This game was way higher scoring than we expected. I thought it was going to be a low
doing the first half
scoring.
projection yesterday.
My first half projection was 19-17. We just didn't get into the second half of the
almost
show.
got that.
That's
And
all.
raise your hand.
Yeah, I can't trust these defenses.
If you could have
apparently.
used all that last week.
Oh, right.
Like, thank you very much. And welcome to the fantasy football in the playoffs.
This had all the makings of just like a low-scoring, boring Thursday night game, and we get all these points. So two defenses have played so well this year.
Well, you got all the points from like receivers not named. Only Lab McConkey produced, right?
Yeah,
It was like if you had either of the quarterbacks, you felt pretty good about that, as Daniel said. Justin Herbert's like an alien. Like some of the stuff he does.
That Darius Davis touchdown?
Ridiculous.
How?
Ridiculous.
He
I thought he was throwing the ball away. The next thing you know, it's like a perfect pass to
He
Darius
also
Davis.
did a scamper up the sideline with this like bad ankle that he's got that's taped like a club, and yet he looked almost nimble running.
The only Herbert
Almost
thing that
nimble.
the only Herbert thing that I want to see at the very end of this week, and I hate to put this into the atmosphere right now, but they took knees at the end of the game. But these were not your average taking.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed that Aaron Rodgers has mastered when he takes a knee now for the Jets, he doesn't lose any yardage. Like, he will, step back and then step forward to the line. He is looking out for the fantasy managers. Herbert lost, I think, was it 20 yards last night, those 3 knees?
Was it 20 yards? Wow. Yeah,
it was a significant number. At least a point lost last night. So if you have Justin Herbert, you end up losing by a point, or you're playing against Herbert and you end up winning by a point or less, let me know. But yes, tough night for Quentin Johnston last night. Mike told you, shadow probably coming from Patrick
He got
a little bit.
Shadow, but I saw him a little bit. Yeah.
Cortland Sutton, 5 catches, 50 yards. Not a great night, but,
Service.
He drew a lot of Christian Fulton in that one, too.
Yeah. Last 3 carries for Justin Herbert, -5 yards, -5 yards, -7 yards. So -17 yards on those 3 carries.
Amazing.
1.7 points.
1.7 points at the end of that game.
That's going to cost somebody a fantasy matchup.
Oh,
absolutely.
God. Yeah, but I really didn't feel like there was anything besides that, again, we're going to the week 17. My perception of no player has changed enough that he has moved from, not start to auto start or auto start to yanking you away.
I think the guy you're watching, but you're not going to start him next week, is Marvin Mims. 47% of the snaps, most since week 12 of last season. Yeah. They are trying to expand him finally. It's taken a long time, but I don't know. A little bit in the backfield, slot, receiver, he's returning. Maybe, year 3, maybe next year he's a name to watch. You're not going to start him next week, though, with everything on the line.
It felt like to me, and tell me if I was wrong in this, but Gus Edwards was the inefficient Gus Edwards we thought he was until he broke that one big run. Other than that, he was averaging 2 yards per carry.
He looked good on that. He broke away from 3 different people. Yeah.
Yeah, on that one run. Correct. On that one run, he did look good.
We all have misses, and if you want to play the results game, then obviously not playing Gus Edwards was a miss. But I feel comfortable with a player who had under 9.6 fantasy points in every game this season, not being in my lineup in the potential semifinals or second week of the first round of your playoffs, whatever it might be. So I'm cool with how things played out last night. I didn't feel like last night was anything sort of dramatic on the fantasy front. Shout out, though, to Cameron Dicker, the kicker. 5 bonus points
amazing.
At the end of the first half.
That was a cool play.
It was cool.
Yeah,
you don't see that. It's been a long time.
I still don't understand how that rule works, or someone calls a fair catch, so you just get the ball wherever the fair catch is called?
Well, so technically, the rules, regardless of no matter where you fair catch the ball, if you fair catch it, you have the right to take an untimed down with a free kick right away. Now, you just never see it happen because if you take that free kick, obviously, if you're pinned way back in your own territory, it's like punting the ball.
Right.
And if you're deep in somebody's territory, why would you punt on the first play of the drive? Why would you free kick on the first play of the drive?
But in this case, the clock ran out, but there was a penalty.
Untimed down, yeah.
There's a penalty.
Broncos penalties. Really.
By the way, does that count as a field goal?
Unless I'm mistaken, yeah.
Okay.
Love that.
Free kick. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. All right, when we come back, we're going to dive into more here from the Week 16 slate. We'll see you guys back here in just one moment. ESPN Bet Live returns today and has everything you need to know before betting this week's NFL slate. Aaron, Joe, and Tyler return today and will be on through the weekend with all the picks, props, and parlays you need. Check out ESPN Bet Live. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Mike Clay, Stephania Bell, Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp, fresh off of an appointment with the dog thermologist. And guys,
dog thermologist.
Pretty well done.
Thank you very much. Nice. Rosie texted me that, said I needed to be able to get it on the show. She actually said don't say that on the show, but I decided to do it anyway.
Well, credit to Rosie.
Yeah.
You know who's the smart one in the family.
Look at that. See, there's puns abounding right now.
I got nothing.
No, I like
Anything else? No? All right.
I'm out now. That's it for the day.
Let's dive
in the interest in competitive balance. You want me to punch your other eye?
Just to make it we're fair on both sides.
Portfolio there, yeah.
I love that. No, Field, I don't want that.
Okay, I won't do that.
All right, let's dive into a couple of things here at the running back position and where we're being impacted here in Week 16. Stephania.
This was a fake tweet yesterday from Shefty, right?
We got news that
This had to be a fake tweet.
Isaac Guerrero, as if the 49ers running backs aren't hurt enough. Is there a chance we're not going to have Isaac Guerrero here in Week 16?
I think there's a really good chance. Isaac Guerrero comes out of last Thursday night game, right? Remember, we were wondering, is he going to start? Because he had a foot sprain, and it was a short week. And not only did he start, he actually performed really well. But if you remember late in the game, he comes out. He has a hamstring injury. Actually, it wasn't in this game he came out. He came out the week prior with the foot injury, and Patrick Taylor stepped in. This week he makes it through the game, but afterwards, as these things do sometimes show up a little bit later, he has a hamstring issue in practice, and now this week it will be Patrick Taylor who's the most likely to step up. Patrick Taylor, who is the backup to Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in Green Bay for 3 years, comes to San Francisco, for depth reasons and finds himself suddenly in a position to start. He had to go in when Garendo had the foot injury previously. He goes for 7, 25, and 1 touchdown. So got his feet wet at least on the football field. They do have Izzy Abanikanda, who they picked up from the Jets when they waived him. They've got Keyshawn Vaughn on the practice squad. But that's your running back room in San Francisco right now. Elijah Mitchell lost in the preseason. Christian McCaffrey from week 1 down, we know what's happened there. And Jordan Mason with his injury issues as well. So it's really, I posted yesterday, is there ever been a more next man up than this running back room in this year, you know?
We know, yeah.
It feels like, Mike, knowing that only a fool would drop Patrick Taylor, how are you going through and deciding that the projection for Patrick Taylor is going to look here in Week 16?
Yeah, only a fool, including me, who needs a running back too in a 16-team league, and had no clue that Garendo was dealing with anything on Tuesday and cut Taylor loose. So not feeling great about that. I need your boy, or
Craig Reynolds, our guy, Craig Reynolds,
rolling this week. Without David Montgomery. Yeah, this is an interesting one with Taylor, because this guy is never in his career, and he was, in UDFA in 2020, played more than half the snaps in a game. His efficiency has not been good. I trust in Kyle Shanahan. He'll get the most out of him, but would not shock me if 4 running backs, honestly, get work in this game. Kyle Juszczyk, of course, an expanded role early in the year when Christian McCaffrey was out. So I'm not going to go too nuts here. I have Taylor ranked as kind of a flex option this week. I don't know if there's a super high ceiling. The Dolphins have not faced a lot of running back volume this season, but have allowed a lot of touchdowns to that position, and that's kind of what you're hoping for. Taylor scored a few weeks ago. You're hoping maybe he gets 12 carries, scores a touchdown, a couple targets, and he pays off for you. But I would be looking at that. By the way, one kind of funny thing, I remember in the offseason, like Adam Schefter always breaking news during free agency, and usually the backup guys don't get much noise. It's just like a passing thought. But his tweet was very significant for Patrick Taylor, as if it was a huge signing. And I remember thinking Taylor's going to have 20 touches in the playoffs next year. So the fantasy.
Hold on, I got to figure this out.
Yeah, I remember it just being wow, I'm surprised Schefter had a kind of a grand.
Yeah.
While Field looks,
I think it was a graphic with it and stuff, and here we are.
I want to ask you, while Field is looking this up, Mike, are you projecting more passing for this 49ers offense, or do you think there's going to be the same amount of rushing volume? It's just distributed between those
I think
four
it'll
guys?
be fairly balanced as usual. I don't think they're going to, maybe slightly more. Nothing that's too overly significant, though.
And I do think the 49ers offense is complicated. I mean, Patrick Taylor's been there. So he's been there since the offseason when he came to San Francisco. Abanikanda and Keyshawn Vaughn are newer additions. So there's some, how much can you rely on that new additions to the team?
And not exactly the same, but obviously Patrick Taylor played for the Packers prior to this, as you mentioned, and that is, if not the same system, very close facsimile of the system, probably why San Francisco added him this offseason. I can confirm there was a photo involved. Yes. Played for Green Bay last year in that playoff game against San Francisco.
Yeah.
Moving on.
All right, Stephania. Talking about more injured running backs, David Montgomery. I can't tell.
You want to put the earmuffs on,
So
Daniel,
this
when we
is still
talk
bad
about
for
this?
fantasy, good maybe for real-life football, but what's the update on David Montgomery?
Well, it's interesting because we thought he was lost for the season, and Dan Campbell said on Monday, after David Montgomery was forced to leave with a knee injury in last week's game, that he was expecting season-ending surgery to follow. Now, you don't often hear about surgery for an isolated MCL injury, but sometimes it can be warranted, certain types of injuries, depending on where it tears, or if there's other structures involved. But what's interesting is that a charity event, a coat drive that David Montgomery is involved with, when he was talking to the Lions reporters there, he said that, they hadn't placed him on IR yet because they were still exploring logistics. And I thought, this sounds like consulting with different opinions and maybe deciding whether we're going to have surgery or not. That's exactly what was happening. So at this point, there's not surgery scheduled. I think he is hopeful that he can rehab this and potentially be available for your Lions in the playoffs. So without knowing the full scope of what the injury is, we don't know that. But for fantasy purposes, it's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs and Jahmyr Gibbs only. This is only postseason implications for you as a Detroit Lions.
David Montgomery is droppable in fantasy football, unfortunately. And Field, with that, is running back one in the cards then for Jahmyr Gibbs?
I don't think we need to say a whole lot on this one. We've been talking about it all week. Jahmyr Gibbs has a real shot for 25 or more touches. He could even push for 30 touches. Mike and I talked about this yesterday. Mike made the case for him as the best running back in fantasy, maybe for the rest, maybe the most valuable running back in fantasy for the final 3 weeks or 2 weeks, depending on how long.
Believe it or not, a polarizing opinion based on social media reactions. Some people are like, obviously, duh, and the other people are like, You have no
Have
idea
you
what
watched
you're
Patrick
talking
Taylor
about.
play?
Yeah.
What they were
That's it,
saying,
yeah.
the other side, yeah.
Exactly.
But, he should see significant work, not just as a runner, but also as a receiving back. And we know that as far as best receiving backs are concerned in the NFL, few better than Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yep. Last time that he played these Chicago Bears, he had 9 carries for 87 yards, 9.7 yards per carry. It seemed like he got benched after a fumble that happened in that game, but he is unbelievably efficient.
He's good.
Jahmyr Gibbs inside the top, I think, 3 for all of us.
By the way, just really quick, he's already RB3, and now you're. I don't expect 30 touches, but just add like 5 more. You go from RB3. Of course, you're in the RB1 discussion. By the way, they play Chicago this week, who's allowed the most touchdowns to running backs this season, so it's a good
Love that.
spot. Most rushing touchdowns to running backs.
All right, Stephania, let's talk about Houston and Kansas City.
Boy, this is a big one.
We got a couple of updates here as well. Give me the injury updates before we dive into this one.
Well, everybody's talking about Patrick Mahomes, right? This is like one of the number one concerns in football. We saw him last week get caught up in this pile, really nasty twist. And at first I thought maybe it was his ribs or his back, but it was his foot that got trapped underneath him. You couldn't really see it from the television angle, but the mechanism for a high ankle sprain where your foot is twisted and then trapped by the weight of a defender comes limping off the field. And you're thinking, boy, this doesn't look good. How is he going to be ready for next week when it's reported as a high ankle sprain? Well, guess what? The one advantage for Patrick Mahomes, if you can look at it that way, is that he has dealt with a high ankle sprain before, and it was back in a divisional playoff against the Jaguars in 2023 when he injured it, and he looked awful then. It was his opposite ankle, worth noting, but he said in talking to reporters early this week, there were a couple key things. Number one, he knows how to deal with this injury because he's been through it before. He rehabbed it aggressively, was able to play. Number two, he said something very important. He said he got his foot out at the very end. And that means his foot was not planted or trapped in the ground where it could have been a much worse injury, even a fracture. But by his foot getting cleared, a lot of the energy that goes into creating the injury gets dissipated out. So this was a mild high ankle sprain, and I think that's why he's been able to recover so well, that and his experience with the injury. That said, the biggest hope for the Chiefs and anyone who's a fan of the Chiefs is that you get through this game because he is expected to play, full participant in practice, even though they were light the start of the week. If he gets tackled and that ankle gets caught underneath him, that's your biggest concern. So he's got to get rid of the ball quickly. He's got to get out of the way. He needs a lot of protection up front. He may have trouble pivoting or twisting off that right ankle. But other than that, you're going to see Patrick Mahomes. You've seen him before play hurt. He's going to look like that. Will he run as well? No.
Well, I wonder this, even with Patrick Mahomes fully practicing each of the last few days this week, I'm assuming he'll look a little more hobbled than a fully healthy Patrick Mahomes. Field, how do you think that's going to impact this running game? Because Cleveland Browns have given up the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs this year, and Isaiah Pacheco has yet to top 10 fantasy points since returning from his injury.
I believe you mean the Houston Texans.
I'm sorry, Houston Texans, my fault.
People get, very sensitive about this.
My fault.
Yeah. I'm not starting either of these backs if I can.
Agreed, yeah.
That being said, if I had to choose one, it would certainly be Isaiah Pacheco. Kareem Hunt has just looked incredibly inefficient, and he has been bad in 3 games with Isaiah Pacheco back. He has been held under 6 fantasy points in each of those 3 games. Meanwhile, for Pacheco's sake, not like he's been great. That being said, if I had to choose one of these 2, it is him. He is playing more. He has seen more rushing attempts. Probably a better bet to find the end zone. However, in 3 games since returning from that that leg injury, Isaiah Pacheco has 1 goal-to-go carry. It came from the 9-yard line, which is almost not a goal-to-go carry as far as I am concerned.
Yeah, he hasn't cleared 8.1 points in a game either since he's been back or scored a touchdown. So I'm with you. It's kind of funny. Last week we thought like Pacheco was taking control. Both he and Hunt had exactly 13 carries, 1 target on 28 snaps. They had the exact same workload last week, and that doesn't even include Samaje Perine playing 19 snaps in that game. They're using all 3 guys, and for the foreseeable future, agreed. If you have to pick one, it's Pacheco, but I would try to avoid.
Crushes Kareem Hunt because Kareem Hunt, with the inefficiency we've talked about, honestly, all season long, he just needed volume in order to be good for us here in fantasy. So with Pacheco back, that's
no doubt
likely not going to happen. Stephania, let's talk about the Browns and the Bengals. This is where my running back note came from.
Got it. Okay.
There. Nick Chubb, though, it looks like is going to miss this game as well as the rest of the season.
Yeah, he's now on injured reserve. We mentioned earlier in the week he had a foot fracture. Kevin Stefanski said they weren't anticipating surgery, but no more Nick Chubb for the regular season.
Okay, well, Mike, we've seen Jerome Ford at a handful of times this year without Nick Chubb. What's he looked like when Chubb hasn't been able to be on the field?
Yeah, so weeks 1, we'll exclude week 6 because Ford got hurt on like his 2nd snap. So weeks 1 through 5, Ford was the lead back there, played 67% of the snaps, 11.9 fantasy points per game, reached 15 twice. So he was fine. I mean, that's like, you're like, if I put him in my flex and get 11, 12 points, hit 15 twice, I'm fine with that. Also, last week, Chubb left that game. Ford had a good game at 104 yards and a touchdown, 18.4 fantasy points, and just 9 touches against a good Chiefs run defense. The Bengals, by the way, really struggling against running backs lately. Their last 3 games, 535 yards and 4 touchdowns for running backs. So if you need a sneaky flex option this week, I think Ford is on that list, but we're going to see Pierre Strong mixed in passing situations. Deontay Foreman can steal a goal line carry for sure. So definitely not a lineup lock, but not the worst flex option.
We've seen some DTR running attempts on Sunday as well. Or in
Sure we will.
Robinson,
I would
starting
assume.
quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. I'm still anticipating Jameis Winston to be QB3, which means that the only way in which he could come in and get this offense going would be if the first 2 quarterbacks ahead of him get hurt.
The great Kevin Pulsifer texted you and I earlier this week, Field, and posed a question I think is really valuable, especially with fantasy managers. Is
What
there
is
a
life?
quarterback that has less zhuzh, or a player that has less zhuzh in the NFL,
Zhuzh.
but is also known by an acronym rather than just
I think his initials, right? Yeah.
Is there
And
another player that's
DTR.
DTR's level that we know as like just his initials, in spite of the fact that he doesn't really
Well,
play?
NWI, obviously.
Okay, NWI. That sounds like an airport, to be honest. NWI sounds like an airport designation.
Northwest
I know.
International.
I think Mike has a personal issue here. You know,
I think
he's
so.
locked into
No,
your
I'm okay.
brain.
We're good now.
MVS,
He's doing
similar?
Westbrook Akine is what who we're talking about. He came back to earth
Yes,
the last 2 weeks.
say
He's
his name.
cooperating.
Yeah, fully. I
MVS is
appreciate
Now
it.
he's won Super Bowls. Like I think
That's
MVS
fair.
Yes,
That's fair. Yeah.
He had some bright moments early in his career.
Who's that?
MVS.
Marquez.
Oh, yeah. Good one, yeah.
That's another good
Or
one.
the non-ball knower Mike Clay over there.
I'm interested. This is one of the games that I'm watching the most and the one that I have the most fear in for all of my Browns pass catchers, just because of the DTR thing and how is that potentially going to impact Jerome
concur.
Ford.
Yeah.
So it'll be a very fun one, or not fun. I don't know. We'll find out for Not Cool Keith how it's going to
Fun,
be.
I'd say.
To
Fun
watch
for the
this.
Bengals, maybe.
That's right. All right, when we come back, we're going to dive into some pass catcher worries here on Fantasy Focus Football. We'll see you guys back here in just one moment. Remember to tune in to Fantasy Football Now on Sunday. Join me, Mike Clay, Stephania Bell, Field Yates, Damian Woody, Liz Loza, and Eric Moody as we get you ready for Week 16 of the fantasy football season. From injuries to rankings, we have got you covered. Find us on ESPN2 starting this Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way up until kickoff. Back here on Fantasy Focus, my name is Daniel Dopp, alongside Field Yates and Stephania Bell and Mike Clay, talking about some potential pass catcher worries here. Stephania, I'm going to start with you. I feel bad that it feels like every single conversation that we have has dealt with an injury at some point, Stephania.
Yeah, I know.
Hey, Stefania's like what I've been doing for the past whatever number of years at ESPN.
It is sort of my lane.
Yeah, well,
I understand.
for the Seattle Seahawks, we had a couple of injuries. Ken Walker III has not played each of the last 2 weeks, so I want to ask you about him, as well as Geno Smith, who left the game early last week, and kind of get an idea of if we think he's going to be back this week.
So let's start with Geno. Just kind of got rolled up on, looked funny, limped off, wanted to go back in but couldn't, was struggling with the knee, and we didn't really know what was going on. We haven't had much clarity in terms of what the injury is. It kind of acted like they were evaluating it. He was dealing with definitely some soreness and some swelling, but he's definitely taken a turn for the better, moving better late in the week, and it sounds like they're optimistic that they will have Geno this week, so that's good news.
Okay, that's good.
And then Kenneth Walker, as you mentioned, has missed a couple weeks with a calf injury, started with a DNP this week, so everybody was getting nervous, but you know, they had been talking about him looking better and feeling like he was getting closer. In fact, I think last week on FF Now I said that it looked like this would be the week he'd return, and now gets a full practice in yesterday. Looks like Kenneth Walker will be up. In the meantime, Zach Charbonnet dealing with an oblique injury. Feels like they've swapped. Remember when Kenneth Walker had the oblique injuries?
Right.
Now Zach's got one. He might be down, not clear yet, limited in practice, but Kenneth Walker should be your starter.
Okay. I mean, honestly, I just need to be selfish here for a minute. I'm playing against Matthew Berry in our Dynasty League that we talk about, and I could use Zach Charbonnet rather than Ken Walker, so it feels like I'm going to have to make a pivot there,
Might.
unfortunately. Mike, I want to ask you about these pass catchers. JSN, I'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show, but DK Metcalf has just been slumping. It feels like for the entire second half of the season, since week 5, he has only topped 4 catches one time in a game. He only has 1 touchdown over that 8-game span. What does he need to do, and is there a chance that he can be unlocked here in Week 16 for fantasy?
Yeah, this is it's been rough, and it's very odd to 9.8 fantasy points per game in 5 games since he's come back from that injury. Under 11 in 4 straight games, not what you expect from DK Metcalf. Only 3 touchdowns this season. His career low is 6. He only has 3 this year, and 2 came in weeks 1 and 2. He came out strong this season, just hasn't really found the end zone. He had 3 targets last week. That is his fewest in a game he didn't leave injured since week 16 of his rookie year in 2019. This is unheard of lack of production and usage near the goal line, end zone targets, you name it, for DK Metcalf. The saving grace here, if you're looking, like, can I trust him as a wide receiver 3, is the matchup. Minnesota, most targets, catches, yards, and fantasy points to wide receivers this season. If you suspect that Seattle will be trailing, as most teams have against Minnesota, they're going to be throwing the ball a little bit extra. And sometimes you got to think, like, at some point there's so many games where a receiver of that level struggles, where you're like Justin Jefferson a few weeks ago, where you're like, they're going to get him going at some point. I still feel okay with him. I mean, he's much lower than usual. I have him at 30, but still a guy I'm probably starting.
The usage and overall volume has been alarming. I would acknowledge that DK probably has like a little bit of a player archetype that makes him a bit more vulnerable to these kind of slumps than others. He's 10th in the NFL in average depth of target, which the farther the football is thrown down the field, the more likely it is to be incomplete. He is 60th amongst wide receivers in catch percentage. So, you're sort of taking high-risk, high-reward throws to DK. We're just in a bad slump. But I see him, as far as rankings-wise, is in the same way as Mike does.
It feels like this slump for him getting in the end zone is not even just a DK thing. I mean, it just seems like Geno Smith has been really inefficient when he gets down inside the 20-yard line.
He throws for 1 million yards and 3 touchdowns all season.
It's crazy.
It's the same problem they had last year. It's amazing they haven't been able to fix that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really insane. All right, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints and Green Bay Packers, Stephania. This one feels like another one of these big injury updates. Alvin Kamara, what can you tell us about him?
I know he's been a rock star for fantasy managers this year, including for me. And unfortunately suffered a groin injury last week. And I think we hear groin and you don't get really into the specifics of it, but head coach Darren Rizzi said that it was an adductor strain. Adductor is primary groin muscles that, basically runs from the hip along your inner thigh. But why it matters so much for a running back, especially like Alvin Kamara, is those muscles give you your core control when you are planting and cutting to the inside, and also explosive movement forward. Alvin Kamara is one of the best when it comes to contact balance. Contact balance, agility, and that quickness through traffic. He's so good at that. This really compromises his game in particular. We don't know the severity of the injury, but we know that he's unlikely to play this week. I saw Adam Schefter reported yesterday that he might not return this season. With any of these soft tissue injuries, you just don't know how they're going to play out. So definitely not this week, but stay tuned. Alvin Kamara has been quick to recover in the past.
50 yards away from running for 1,000 yards for the first time in his career. Perhaps that is motivating him to return if he is healthy. Kendra Miller, I think we all kind of view as, are we 25? About there, Mike?
Yeah, that's around where I have him, but I think the ceiling is extremely high for Kendra Miller. I'm a little worried about them going into Green Bay. That's tough circumstances this time of year. The Packers, we saw what they did in Seattle last week to that offense. Could be tough, but Kendra Miller last week, after Alvin Kamara dominated the snaps early, played 21 of the final 24 snaps. It was 21-3 over Jamal Williams. I am pumped for this guy. It was a day 2 pick last year, the future running back for this team, they hope, and I think he's going to get a very long look. He's been effective so far, 4.6 yards per carry. He hasn't done much in the passing game this year, but he did last year, and he was very explosive. He has that in his skill set. And by the way, he has 2 career games with more than 10 touches. They were both last year. 90 yards on 16 touches, 79 yards and a touchdown on 14 touches. So when they've given him opportunity, he has delivered. I know there's been some off the field, locker, whatever's going on behind the scenes kind of stuff, injuries, of course, but I'm pumped for this guy. I think more than any other player, I almost consider him for start of the week here. I'm pumped for Kendra this week.
Available in 65% of fantasy.
I think he's startable for sure.
And it's a Monday Night Football game, so obviously right at this point you're assuming Alvin Kamara is not going to go. If you do have him, you need to make sure that you have Kendra Miller.
20 touch upside at least. It might be more than that. They just have no one else to.
Yeah, who else are they going to give the football to there?
The hard part probably for there is just you just fear that this game is next thing you know it's 21-0 and early in the second quarter and they're throwing 1,000,000 times and Spencer Rattler's under siege and all that, playing in the freezing cold
get those
Green
targets
Bay.
though too.
Maybe.
I mean, he should. I really think he's going to play a ton in this game.
All right, we've played this game, and we can be quick on it. We played this game a number of times this year. Field
Fast.
ESPN roulette, bam, spin the wheel. Which one of the wide receivers you want?
Here's the rule. If you start a Packers wide receiver, you're not allowed to have any expectation whatsoever. Your expectation is for anything. You can't. You have zero emotions.
Yeah.
Jayden Reed might score you the most fantasy points of any wide receiver.
He might get a goose egg.
Like he did in week 1. And then he was the second highest scoring wide receiver in week 5. And then he's had weeks where he's gotten for 0. Christian Watson, same deal. Romeo Dobbs, he might score 2 touchdowns. But in games in which he didn't score a touchdown, say again?
Dontavian Wicks.
Dontavian Wicks, who knows? Yeah, it's fun.
He might show up.
Dobbs plays all the snaps and has up and down production. So just if you start a Packers wide receiver, don't yell at us regardless of what happens.
Agreed. I'm with you on that. All right, we're going to be back here with more from Fantasy Focus in just 1 minute. We'll see you guys in a second. Download the ESPN Bet Sportsbook to claim your new player bonus, and for a limited time, unlock access to 30 days of ESPN Plus to stream exclusive live sports. Sign up with the promo code FANTASY to get started with the ESPN Sportsbook app today. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Mike Clay, Stephania Bell, and Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp, diving into some Week 16 burning questions, my friends. We're going to start with the Ravens and Steelers. Stephania, as I have with literally every other segment so far today, I'm going to come back to you because we have more injuries in this game. Not just a wide receiver, but also a running back, a defensive player that has been known to wreak havoc in backfields. What can you tell us about both George Pickens and TJ Watt?
Yeah, TJ Watt, one of the key players for the Steelers, and he ended up with an ankle injury last week. It's a low ankle sprain, but it's significant because when you rush from the edge and you have to plant that foot and come around the corner, if you have instability in that ankle, it makes it really hard to do. Now, it was interesting. His brother, JJ, was on Pat McAfee show talking about that specific challenge for TJ, but he said, look, he wants to play. He's going to try and be out there, and everything is pointing to him making himself available. Can he be the same guy? Will he struggle? We've seen him struggle a little bit to be as effective when he's been injured before, but he's still a presence that has to be respected. George Pickens, don't expect him to play this week, still dealing with the hamstring injury. Keep in mind, the Steelers have that funky schedule with a lot of games concentrated a short amount of time, and they play again Wednesday. So the thought is that George Pickens is making progress from this injury, and maybe he will be available Wednesday.
Okay. I mean, that would be huge for fantasy managers if that is the case. If not, is there a wide receiver, Mike, in this Steelers offense? We've asked this question the last couple of weeks that you even come close to trusting.
No, I mean, it's going to be Van Jefferson and Mike Williams on the outside and Calvin Austin in the slot. I mean, you hope one of them finds the end zone, but you don't want to start any of these guys.
Okay. So then on the other side of this game, Field Yates, let me ask you about the Ravens wide receivers. It kind of feels like we have not necessarily gone back and forth, but it's like some weeks it's been a Zay Flowers week and he's just boomed. Some weeks it's been a Rashad Bateman week and he's boomed. And then other weeks, neither one of them have done anything. What kind of confidence do you have in any of these Ravens wide receivers?
I'm not sure if this is ironic, interesting, compelling, none of those things, but if ever there was a week in which the Ravens could use Deontay Johnson, this would be the week because Nelson Aguilar still hasn't fully cleared concussion protocol. Rashad Bateman sounds iffy.
He was in a walking boot yesterday. Yeah. So we've got, to me, this is like Zay Flowers is certainly the preferred of the three because if either of those two play, Rashad Bateman or Nelson Aguilar, they will not be at full strength.
Yeah, and we'll see whether they either of them do. It sounded like both of them are legitimately iffy to play on Saturday. You'll see some Tylan Wallace. Maybe Mark Andrews has a bigger target share. Isaiah Likely will be more prominently involved.
Walker caught a touchdown last week.
As Walker, the fourth-round pick from North Carolina. Drake May's favorite target for the second half of last season. So,
and of course, the team is playing Saturday, play Wednesday. This is really a factor in determining if some of these guys are able to go.
If Bateman does go, you have to view Bateman as one of those players that it's Jekyll or it's Hyde, right? I'm not sure which is the good, which is the bad, but he either's going to get you 80 yards and a touchdown, or he's going to get you 15 yards. If you look at his season-long scores in games in which he has not scored a touchdown, it has been completely unusable. So tread lightly if Bateman does play.
Yeah, that's what happens when you average 4.1 targets per game. He's been over 5 3 times this season as a full-timer in this Baltimore offense. So, yeah, I'm with you. Not feeling too excited about starting Rashad Bateman. It's just so boom-bust.
Also, just for your pop culture references, Dr. Jekyll is the good one, and then Mr. Hyde is the bad one.
Got it.
Just for moving forward.
We just had
Is
this
that a
conversation.
pop culture reference?
It's like from the 1940s.
It's a literature, a literature reference.
That's a Matthew level.
Some of us read
pop culture
books.
reference.
Yes.
Some of us read
I
books.
think they made a
Peekaboo
movie out of
House
that.
every morning. I read Fritz the Farting Reindeer before bed every night.
Does that go in your library that smells of rich mahogany? You pull it off the shelf. And
Fritz the Farting Reindeer is an old-timer.
So so good.
Very clearly.
All right, Stephania, let's dive. Oh, actually, Stephania, I don't need to start with you on this one. I feel so bad. You've been so involved. I'm going to give you a quick break because we're going to talk about the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. Mike Clay. Last week, we saw Adam Thielen kind of come back down to earth a little bit after two games in a row where he had at least 19 fantasy points. He still hit double digits, but Jalen Coker really boomed last week. How are you approaching these Panthers wide receivers, knowing that it does look like Xavier Legette is going to miss this one, or is at least doubtful?
He should be out for this one. Adam Thielen is a guy that you feel like right now is a fine wide receiver 3, maybe not the highest ceiling, but again, he's probably going to get you double-digit fantasy points, 28% target share in his last 3. Again, double-digit fantasy points on all 3 of those. And I mentioned this earlier in the week. The Panthers have the 7th longest streak going of games with 2+ offensive touchdowns.
Love that.
The first 6 are all the superstar offenses in the NFL. So they're finding the end zone, and Thielen's a big part of it. Arizona's been pretty good against receivers over the last couple of months, which is somewhat notable, but Thielen should still come in enough targets to be a fine wide receiver 3. And Jalen Coker is fine. I mean, he's a good young prospect, but not consistent enough in terms of his usage. Had the big game last week, but 6 targets in that game. 6+ targets in 3 of his last 4. I just don't know if there's room for a consistent second receiver in this offense.
If you had to play Jalen Coker, you are throwing a dart throw of dart throws, trying to catch lightning in a bottle there for a second week in a row. Cardinals have at least given up 16.5 fantasy points to wide receivers in 3 of the last 4 games. Week 12 against JSN, 19.7. Week 13, gave up 16.9 to Justin Jefferson. Week 14, gave up 19.6 again to JSN. Last week they played the Patriots, which doesn't count. They don't really have wide receivers.
Correct. Yeah, so room for one, it sounds like.
Exactly. It seems like one of these guys could maybe have a good thing, which is why we have Adam Thielen ranked where we do.
There we go.
Field, when are we talking about Jacksonville? Oh, actually, Stephania, I'm going to tap you back in here. Don't help you to go away.
Let me guess. Brenton Strange.
We got Brenton Strange. We got Sincere McCormick. We got Jacoby Myers. We got a little bit of everybody in this Raiders-Jaguars game. What can you give us an update on here?
So Brenton Strange looking good. Expected to play, so we can feel good about that. Nice. I just want to give a positive thing
Absolutely.
there,
Something good here.
I need to do
All
that
about to go
once in a
downhill.
while.
Love
Right
it.
before I go to Sincere McCormick, who we were so happy to see him get his shot. Unfortunately, now on injured reserve because of an ankle injury, so expect Amir Abdullah to be your primary running back there. And Jacoby Myers has been on the injury report with an ankle issue. Keep in mind, last week, a couple limited practice sessions, moved up to full practice and played. I think he'll do the same this week, been limited. Maybe more importantly for Jacoby Myers, Aiden O'Connell, who missed last week because of a knee contusion, is looking good, full practice, and expected to be the starter this week for the Raiders.
I didn't think I'd be saying this, but that's great news. O'Connell really helped us.
Did you see Aiden O'Connell against the Chiefs? I mean, he impressed me in that one. So,
what a bummer for Sincere McCormick. A great story. Guy
is.
who's battled with some serious injuries in the early portions of his NFL career. Hopefully he is back and has a chance to compete for that starting job going into next season. But until he is back, which won't be until next year, we got to figure out this backfield. And so if you look at the 4 games in the middle of the season in which Zamir White was either out or severely limited, Alexander Mattison became the guy in this backfield. There was a total of 66 carries and 12 catches in that 4-game stretch, 16 targets, in that 4-game stretch. I'm not totally convinced they'll go back to the Alexander Mattison this week, because we've seen more of Amir Abdullah. And frankly, he's, for an offense that is desperate for sparks, he's given them one. He's a very effective pass catcher. He has been since his days as a second-round pick of Daniels Lions, which was like 8 years ago now. So I do think this will be more of a split on Sunday as opposed to the Madison show.
Agreed, and that's what we saw last week. After McCormick went out of that game, it was 28 snaps for Abdullah, 20 for Madison in that game. 3 carries for Abdullah, 7 targets. 7 carries and 4 targets for Madison, so pretty clear split there. I mean, it was Madison leading as the ball carrier. He might should lead in the goal line mark, although Abdullah scored in 3 of his last 5 games. And then, of course, passing down work to the more explosive Amir Abdullah. Look, Madison's averaging 3.3 yards per carry this season. He hasn't been super effective. His last game with double-digit fantasy points was Week 7. His last touchdown was Week 6. The reason why these guys are kind of on the radar here is the matchup. They are playing Jacksonville. So if you come out of this and say, wow, Madison, they both scored a touchdown, or one of them had 80 yards and one scored, that won't be shocking at all. Jacksonville's allowed 17 touchdowns to running backs. That's second most and the third most fantasy points to running backs so far this season. And then, look, even Abdullah, though, he's yet to clear 13 touches in a game. He has single-digit fantasy points in 10 of 14. So I don't want to get too carried away with either guy, but it's going to be a split in a good matchup. There's worse flex options in deeper leagues, I guess, but definitely a risky investment.
RB, after removing last night's players, the higher of the 2 ranked for me is Amir Abdullah. He's all the way up at RB 28.
That's tough.
Tread lightly.
Tough with no teams
again,
on a bye. Yeah, running back 28 usually is outside that flex radar unless you really need someone.
But I have to say, he did look kind of sprightly for a seasoned veteran running back. I thought he ran pretty well last
Not just that, I thought the full screen that we just showed, like, he looked pretty cool and tough. His arms were crossed. He had, like, this real cool vibe as a part of
Like you right now. With
Yeah,
the
you
sunglasses
look
and
exactly
that,
like what I look like right
color
now.
coordinated lions set up there. With
Yeah.
the
You
blue
look
shoes
like
and
when
stuff.
you get the, like around this time of the year, you get the catalog and it's like, buy the gear of your favorite team. Yeah. You look like the guy that's posing.
doing a
as
shoot after
Lions
this?
fan. Yeah.
I do. I got the blue shoes. I got the Honolulu blue shoes with some Lions socks. I got a Lions hoodie on underneath. This could be any hoodie.
You have a friendship bracelet in the Lions colors?
I have a friendship bracelet from my niece Izzy that says "In my Uncle Dan era," and then it has the Lions.
Oh, I love it. How sweet is that?
So that's pretty legit.
I always
So-
find it interesting that most people that I know in your life outside of ESPN call you Dan.
Yes, almost everybody other than you guys and people that I meet nowadays call me Dan rather than Daniel because I
call
grew
you
up
Dan
as
or-
Dan.
What would you prefer?
Daniel.
Okay.
Once I joined the military, I started introducing myself as Daniel everywhere, but like you're just not going to break that mold of what your friends who have known you for 30 plus years are going to call you. Like I don't know if you guys have different names that you went by. Did you?
Yeah, we're not going to go into some of those, but
Okay.
I would say you know they
Now
say,
we have to go into some of those,
They would
Stephania.
say that you
went by
really
Saquon
can
growing
only
up.
live up to your full potential when you're actually using your full name. So,
Exactly.
Daniel Dopp, Field Minister Yates. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Then there's Mike Clay.
Lester.
Michael Lester Clay Jr.
I have the longest name here, Michael Lester Clay Jr.
Yeah.
We need to use this more.
We
this
do.
is too good.
Yeah.
How are we overlooking Lester as
Well,
a middle name?
I probably do it because my father-in-law is Lester.
That's right, yeah.
Meanwhile, so Chapin's twin married a guy named Chris. His dad's also named Lester.
That's
So
wow.
both dads
unbelievable.
in this now marriage are Lester.
Meant to be.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of Lesters.
That is.
You guys know what my middle name is?
Lee, Leigh.
Dar.
Yeah. Well,
Oh wow.
that's kind of the nickname. But yeah, Stephania Bell. So it used to be called Sleigh Bell during the holidays, because people thought that was funny because my name is Leigh. I can't believe I'm going to do this on air, but I will tell you that my neighborhood friends used to call me Snuffleupagus. Like, the character from
What?
Sesame
Yes, of
Street,
course.
Mr. Snuffleupagus. So I was Snuff, and I became Snuff. And still, as adults, at the age we are, they'll be like, "Hey, Snuff, what's going on?" So
I now know
that
what I'll
is-
be calling you. For
No,
the rest
no,
of
no,
time.
no, no.
That's amazing.
Like
Welcome
you,
into Fantasy Football
That
Now
is
alongside
allowed
Damian
only
Wood,
by
Mike
the
and
circle of
Snuff.
trust from
using
my
that
street
Sunday.
growing up. If you were on the block, you could call me Snuff.
Yeah, I was either called Dan or people called me Dopper. It was always Dopper. They would always. I don't know if you guys had any like last names where they shortened them or made it something.
Oh yeah, Bell didn't give
Barkley for me.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so
many jokes.
Saquon and Barkley were the two things that they called. Yeah.
Call my
They
shot.
knew he wasn't even born back then. but-
Not that old.
well, he's 10 years younger?
Probably.
All right, when we come back, we got our starts of the week here on Fantasy Focus. We'll see you back here in just a moment. The best part about ESPN Fantasy is you guys, the listeners, the fantasy football community, and we want to make sure that we are always answering your questions. So head on over to Twitter and use the hashtag FFNow to be able to drop your Week 16 lineup questions in there that we will answer on the show. Tune in on Sunday on ESPN2 at 10 a.m. Eastern to see if your question makes it onto the show. Back here on Fantasy Focus, we are giving you the start of the week here in Week 16. Snuffy, I'm going to start with you.
That was not part of it. It was Snuff.
Oh, it was just
Okay,
Snuff?
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
well, but you and I are like real close. So I was
Okay,
able to shorten your short
If you
name.
feel, Daniel's putting his own emphasis on it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I wonder why you wanted to start with me. Maybe because my start of the week is on your favorite team,
Maybe
the
that's why.
Detroit Lions, and I'm going with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'll probably fall in that camp of like, this is so obvious because he's a workhorse, but I really think he could have a ridiculous performance this week. We saw that, we used your graphic earlier in the week where the 2 out of the 3 games where Montgomery was not available, Jahmyr Gibbs proved that he handled a bigger workload.
Yep.
As Mike referenced, he's 3rd in fantasy points overall in the season with 265.2. Do you know that Alvin Kamara is ahead of him at 265.3? So technically he could be RB2, and he doesn't have that much further to go to get to RB1. So a lot of work for him. I love the fact that he's a pass catcher as well as a running back who carries the ball. Just the opportunity he affords you in the week where you can basically win your playoffs. If you're in a couple weeks playoffs, you've got
Some good options.
great option.
Yep. All right, Mike Clay, I'm going to let you go next. Where are you going with your start of the week?
Yeah, so I picked mine before we knew for sure. And Alvin Kamara, I might have went Kendra Miller because I'm really pumped for him this week. But I'm going Kyler Murray just because I want to give a bit of a vote of confidence for a guy who, like, honestly, on my sheet, it's a lot of negative stats. You know, the rushing yards down, the fantasy points down since Call of Duty came out. Like, we've been through this. 1 weekly finish better than 10 since week 8. There's a lot of reasons to be suspect. However, playing the Carolina Panthers this week.
That's right.
The weather right now looks fine for this week, so not super worried about that. We'll keep an eye on that. The Panthers have allowed 27 passing touchdowns to quarterbacks this season. That is most in the NFL. The 6th most fantasy points. Last week, some guy named Cooper Rush went in there with the Panthers as a favorite and put up 3 touchdowns and 19.1 fantasy points. So I think that the reason I want to go with him is because I think if you're like, can I do it this week? I'm in the Final Four. Can I trust Kyler Murray? I think the answer is yes. I think he'll get the job done for you.
Might it be the week that he gets Trey McBride a touchdown? He talked about wanting to get it to him, so
yeah, I think it's
we'll
good.
We want that. We need that.
We
need that.
Make
Please,
that
Trey.
happen.
All right, Field, you're up next.
Mine is a certain player named Khalil Shakir, who has now 7 or more targets in 8 straight games. He is Josh Allen's clear wide receiver 1, and he's fantasy friendly. If you guys have seen the video going around on Twitter recently, you may know that in this last game, there was that little play where Josh Allen sort of bunted it to Khalil Shakir, and in the huddle, he asked Khalil, do you want me to hand it off to you? You want me to throw it to you? He said, I'll take the throw. Gets a receiving touchdown. So if you won your matchup with Khalil Shakir by 1 point this past week, you can thank him.
Yeah, and he's was not a touchdown scorer most of the season. He had a couple early weeks, 1 and 3, and then
they can't slow him down
all year. And now he has 2 in a row. Leads the NFL in catch rate and yards after the catch too.
Yeah.
Just
he doesn't need air yards because he catches everything.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
So good. Speaking of wide receivers that are so good, I'm going to go with Jackson Smith and Jigba taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Mike, you told us earlier in the show all the things that Minnesota is bad at.
I had
usually
those
the numbers guys.
Mike's,
that makes sense.
I snagged him at the party last night.
That's what it is. Minnesota gives up the most targets, receptions, and receiving yards to wide receivers this year, at least 11.9 fantasy points in 5 straight games for JSN. 5 of those games, he's topped 18 fantasy points. Nobody has run more routes in the slot this year than JSN. Minnesota has given up the 4th most completions to wide receivers in the slot, 3rd most yards to wide receivers in the slot. So
I'm going to say, we liked him preseason, and we got some flack about him not coming out sooner, and emerging. And look at him in the back half of the season. Impressed by him.
Doubt Queen Snuffy.
That's right. That's right. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Today's show is presented by Wingstop. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. We'll see you guys on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday. See ya.
Snuffy.
That's the best. I'm so glad you told us that.
Nickname.
I'm so glad you told us that.
Whoa.
Oh,
now you're throwing.
my swill.